A chilly afternoon in Greville. It was a crisp winter afternoon in downtown Greville, a picturesque city known for its old-world charm mingling seamlessly with modernity. Narrow cobblestone streets wound through districts alive with family-owned bakeries, antique shops, and the occasional modern skyscraper. Greville had a rhythm of its own, a harmony of tradition and progress. Yet beneath the surface of this idyllic setting lay an undercurrent of tension, often unspoken but undeniably present. Dana Carter, a poised woman in her early 30s, had just exited her favorite cafe, clutching a steaming cup of coffee. The cafe was her midday retreat, a small oasis in her busy life. Dana was married to Ethan Carter, the city's commissioner of police, a position that came with prestige and power. But Dana valued her independence and prided herself on being treated as any other citizen. She avoided flaunting her connection to authority, preferring to navigate life on her own terms. The cafe's familiar warmth lingered as she walked to her car parked a few steps away. A light wind rustled the bare branches of the trees lining the street. Dana had always loved Greville, with its mix of charm and bustle. But today, an unusual unease settled in her chest as two uniformed police officers approached her. "Ma'am," one of the officers, whose name had read Blake, called out, his tone clipped. The other officer, Thomas, flanked him, his expression unreadable. Dana stopped in her tracks, confused but composed. "Is something wrong, officers?" she asked, her voice steady despite the growing tension. Blake's sharp gaze swept over her. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in this area," he said. "We need to ask you a few questions." Dana blinked, taken aback. "Suspicious activity," she repeated. "I just left the cafe." "I'm not sure what you mean." Thomas stepped forward, his demeanor more aggressive. "We'll need to search you, ma'am." The words hung in the air like a cold mist. Dana's stomach tightened. "Search me? On what grounds?" she asked, striving to remain polite despite her rising discomfort. Blake folded his arms, his expression hardening. "Are you refusing a search?" he demanded, his tone edging toward confrontation. "No, I'm not refusing," Dana said firmly. "But I'd like to know why I'm being stopped. Have I done something wrong?" Thomas, impatient, stepped even closer. "Turn around," he ordered, reaching for a pair of handcuffs. Dana's heart pounded. "Excuse me? I've done nothing wrong," she protested, her composure slipping as disbelief washed over her. "Turn around," Thomas repeated, his voice cold and final. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Passers-by averted their eyes, hurriedly moving past the scene. No one stopped to intervene. Dana felt a wave of humiliation and helplessness as she turned around, complying to avoid escalation. The metallic chill of handcuffs on her wrists stung as Thomas began an invasive pat-down, pulling at her coat and rummaging through her handbag. She bit her lip, fighting back tears of frustration and humiliation. When Thomas finally stepped back, Blake's piercing eyes fixed on her. "Anything to hide, lady?" he asked mockingly. Dana's jaw tightened. Her voice, though steady, carried a sharp edge. "I'd like to call my husband." Blake let out a dismissive laugh. "Your husband? Go ahead. Let's see who he is." Dana reached for her phone, the handcuffs now removed, and dialed a familiar number. The phone rang twice before a deep, authoritative voice answered. "Dana, what's wrong?" Ethan Carter's voice was calm but tinged with concern. "They're searching me, Ethan," Dana said, glancing at the officers who now looked slightly uneasy. "Officers Blake and Thomas. They say I'm suspicious." A pause followed before Ethan's voice returned, colder this time. "Where are you?" "Olive and Maple, just outside the cafe," Dana replied. "I'll be there in 5 minutes," Ethan said firmly before the line went dead. Dana felt a surge of strength, bolstered by the knowledge that Ethan was on his way. But the humiliation of the situation still gnawed at her. Why had they assumed she was suspicious? Was it because of her appearance, her skin color? The question hung heavy in her mind. The officers stood stiffly, their initial bravado fading as a sleek black SUV sped into view. It came to a sharp halt, and out stepped Ethan Carter. Tall, imposing, and dressed impeccably in his commissioner's uniform, Ethan exuded an air of authority that was impossible to ignore. Blake and Thomas froze, their expressions shifting from confidence to alarm as they recognized him. "Commissioner Carter," Blake stammered, stepping forward as if to explain. Ethan's piercing gaze stopped him in his tracks. "Step aside," he commanded, his voice icy. The officers complied, retreating a few steps. Ethan turned to Donna, his expression softening as he reached for her hand. "Are you all right?" he asked gently, scanning her face for any sign of distress. Dana nodded, though her eyes glistened with unused tears. "I'm fine," she said quietly, "but they treated me like a criminal. For nothing." Ethan's face darkened, his jaw tightening as he turned back to the officers. The tension in the air was palpable, the street now eerily quiet, as onlookers watched the scene unfold. "Explain yourselves," Ethan demanded, his voice low but menacing. Blake hesitated, his confidence shattered. "We, receive reports of suspicious activity, sir," he began, his voice faltering. She matched the description. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Matched the description of what? Did she resist you? Threaten you?" "No, sir," Thomas mumbled, avoiding eye contact. "Then why," Ethan said, his voice rising slightly, "did you feel the need to detain and humiliate her? Was it because she's black? Was that your only reason?" Blake opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. The silence that followed was deafening. Spectators held their breath, waiting for what would happen next. Ethan pulled out his phone, his expression grim. "You've crossed a line," he said, "and there will be consequences. Justice unfolds." The weight of Ethan's words lingered in the frosty air. Officers Blake and Thomas stood rigid, their confidence drained under the fierce scrutiny of the police commissioner. Spectators, who had moments ago avoided involvement, now lingered nearby, drawn by the unfolding drama. Ethan, still gripping his phone, turned his attention briefly to his wife. "Donna," he said softly, "you've done nothing wrong, and this will be set right. I promise." The reassurance in his voice was firm, but Dana could still see the anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. As he dialed a number, the street was so silent that the soft tone of the ringing line seemed to echo. After 2 rings, a voice answered, brisk and professional. "This is Director Hayes, Internal Affairs." Ethan's tone sharpened. "Hayes, this is Commissioner Carter. I need you to dispatch a team to Olive and Maple immediately. 2 officers, Blake and Thomas, are to be placed under suspension pending an investigation into their conduct." "Understood, Commissioner. I'll have someone there within 10 minutes, came the reply. Ethan hung up, his steely gaze returning to the 2 officers. "You've embarrassed yourselves and this department," he said, his voice low but cutting. "Your actions today were not only unprofessional but unethical. You have a duty to serve and protect, not to harass innocent people because of your biases." Blake, now visibly pale, tried to salvage the situation. "Commissioner, we were just following protocol." "Protocol?" Ethan interrupted, his voice rising. "What protocol allows you to detain and search someone without probable cause? What protocol teaches you to assume guilt based on appearance? Don't you dare hide behind that excuse." Thomas remained silent, his eyes fixed on the ground. Blake stammered. We thought we were doing our job, sir." "No," Ethan snapped, his tone ice cold. "Your job is to uphold the law, not wield it carelessly. You failed, not just Dana, but the entire community." The quiet murmurs of the growing crowd added to the tension. Some pulled out their phones to capture the scene, the glow of their screens a testament to the gravity of what was happening. Greville was a small city, and news traveled fast. This incident, already ignited by whispers, was now on the verge of becoming a public reckoning. A black sedan pulled up moments later, and 3 individuals stepped out wearing suits. The Internal Affairs team, led by Director Hayes, wasted no time. Hayes, a woman with an air of unshakable authority, approached Ethan with a nod. "Commissioner," she greeted, "we'll take it from here." Ethan inclined his head toward Blake and Thomas. "These two officers need to be debriefed and investigated. I expect a thorough report on their actions today." Hayes turned to the officers, her sharp gaze making them flinch. "Officers, you're relieved of duty pending the investigation. Hand over your badges and firearms." Blake hesitated, his face a mix of defiance and fear. "This isn't fair," he muttered. "We didn't mean any harm." Hayes arched an eyebrow, her tone razor-sharp. "Fair. Fair would have been exercising restraint and following the law. If you've acted appropriately, the investigation will show that. But if you haven't, there will be consequences." Reluctantly, Blake and Thomas handed over their badges and weapons. The crowd, now numbering in the dozens, watched in silence as the disgraced officers were escorted to the waiting sit-in. As they drove off, a collective sense of justice began to settle, but the sting of what had transpired remained. Ethan turned to address the onlookers. "What happened here today is unacceptable," he said, his voice steady but filled with conviction. "No one should be judged or treated differently because of their race, gender, or background. This city deserves better from its law enforcement, and I will ensure that trust is restored." Applause broke out among the crowd, a sign of support and hope. Ethan reached for Dana's hand, his expression softening. "Let's go home," he said gently. Dana hesitated. "Ethan, this isn't just about me. This is about everyone who's ever been made to feel powerless or invisible. People need to know that change is possible." Ethan nodded, his respect for his wife deepening. "Then let's make it happen together." A ripple effect. The following weeks were a whirlwind of action. Ethan and Dana worked together to organize forums and listening sessions where residents could share their experiences with law enforcement. Dana, initially hesitant about stepping into the spotlight, became a powerful voice for change. Her story resonated deeply with the community, inspiring others to speak out. Ethan spearheaded reforms within the police department. He introduced mandatory bias training, revamped protocols for stops and searches, and established an independent oversight committee. These changes were met with resistance from some quarters, but Ethan remained resolute. "Accountability isn't optional," he told his officers during a department-wide meeting. "It's the foundation of trust." Blake and Thomas faced disciplinary action. Internal Affairs investigation revealed a pattern of questionable behavior in their past records. Both officers were ultimately dismissed from the force. Their case became a cautionary tale within the department, a stark reminder of the consequences of misconduct. A community transformed. Months later, Greville began to feel different. The forums had fostered a sense of unity and understanding among residents and law enforcement. Dana's leadership in these efforts earned her admiration and respect, not only as the commissioner's wife, but as a leader in her own right. One evening, as Dana and Ethan walked hand in hand through the now bustling streets of Greville, they passed the cafe where the incident had occurred. The memory was still vivid, but so was the progress that had followed. "Do you regret standing up that day?" Ethan asked softly. Dana shook her head, a determined smile on her face. "Not for a second. Change starts with one moment, one voice. And sometimes, that's all it takes to light a fire." Ethan squeezed her hand. "You've inspired a lot of people, Dana, including me." The lesson from that chilly afternoon in Greville was clear. When faced with injustice, silence is not an option. It's through courage, accountability, and collective action that true change takes root. And in the heart of a small city, a story of wrongful suspicion became a catalyst for transformation, a testament to the power of standing up and standing together. A legacy of accountability. 6 months had passed since that fateful day in downtown Greville. The city, once marked by simmering tension and quiet divisions, had transformed into a beacon of hope and accountability. The ripple effects of Dana's courage and Ethan's decisive actions were evident everywhere, from the bustling streets to the halls of city governance. The police department was no longer the same. Ethan had spearheaded initiatives that went beyond basic reform. He partnered with community leaders, activists, and even skeptics to craft policies that addressed systemic biases head-on. Regular town hall meetings became a cornerstone of this effort, allowing citizens to engage directly with law enforcement officers in open, constructive dialogues. Dana, who had initially resisted stepping into the public eye, had embraced her role as a community advocate. She founded an organization called Voices United, dedicated to promoting equity, accountability, and justice in Greville and beyond. Through workshops, mentorship programs, and public awareness campaigns, the organization became a platform for marginalized voices to be heard and empowered. But change, as they quickly learned, was not without its challenges. Facing the resistance, while many in Greville embraced the reforms, there were those who pushed back. Some officers within the police department resented the new measures, viewing them as unnecessary or overly critical. Anonymous letters and veiled comments circulated, accusing Ethan of betraying his own by holding officers to higher standards. Dana, too, faced criticism. Some detractors labeled her a troublemaker, claiming she was exploiting her husband's position to gain attention. Others dismissed her efforts as performative, doubting the sincerity of her mission. One evening, as Dana prepared for a community panel, Ethan walked into the living room, carrying a file of reports. His shoulders were tense, and his usual calm demeanor seemed strained. "What's wrong?" Dana asked, setting down her notes. Ethan sighed and handed her a letter. Another anonymous complaint. "This one's accusing me of undermining the department's authority." Dana scanned the letter, her jaw tightening. "Cowards," she said, her voice laced with frustration. "They can't even own their words." Ethan sat beside her, taking her hand. "Change is hard. It threatens people who are comfortable with the status quo. But we can't let that stop us." Dana looked at him, her resolve hardening. "We won't." Building bridges. To counter the resistance, Ethan and Dana doubled down on transparency and engagement. Ethan launched a groundbreaking initiative called Bridges to Justice, which paired officers with community mentors from diverse backgrounds. The program aimed to foster empathy and understanding by immersing officers in the lived experiences of the people they served. The results were striking. Officer Rachel Kim, a 10-year veteran of the force, initially resisted the program. "I didn't see the point," she admitted during a public forum. "I thought I already understood what it meant to serve the community." But after spending weeks shadowing a local youth mentor, Rachel's perspective shifted. "I realized how much I didn't know, how much I hadn't listened. It changed the way I see my job, and it changed the way I see people." Stories like Rachel's began to multiply, silencing some of the critics and proving that the reforms were more than symbolic gestures, a personal reckoning. Despite the progress, the memory of the initial incident still haunted Dana. One night, as she stood by the window watching the city lights twinkle, she found herself reliving the humiliation she had felt that day. Ethan, noticing her silence, approached her gently. "Still thinking about it?" he asked. Dana nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't forget the way they looked at me, Ethan. Like I was less than human. No matter how much we change, I don't know if that feeling will ever go away." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "You took that pain and turned it into something powerful, Dana. You've given people hope, and you've reminded me, and everyone else, that accountability starts with us." Dana smiled faintly. "Sometimes I wonder if it's enough." "It is," Ethan said firmly. "And even if it's not, we'll keep fighting until it is." The day of recognition. A year after the incident, Greville held its first annual Day of Accountability and Unity, a citywide event celebrating the strides made toward justice and equality. The event included panel discussions, workshops, and a recognition ceremony for those who had contributed to the city's transformation. Dana was hesitant when she learned she was to receive the Courage in Action Award. "I didn't do this for recognition," she told Ethan. "You didn't," he replied. "But your courage lit the spark. People need to see what that spark can do." The ceremony was held in the city square, the same area where Dana had been unjustly detained. As she stepped onto the stage to accept the award, she looked out at the crowd, a sea of faces filled with hope and gratitude. Among them were people she had mentored, officers who had embraced the reforms, and community members who had found their voices. Dana took a deep breath, her voice steady as she began. "A year ago, I stood here feeling powerless. But today, I stand here reminded of the power we all have to create change. This isn't just my story. It's ours. And it's far from over." The road ahead. Greville's journey was far from finished. Challenges remained, and the road to lasting equity and justice would be long. But the city had become a symbol of what was possible when courage and accountability met determination and unity. For Dana and Ethan, their work became a shared legacy, a testament to the power of standing together in the face of injustice. And for Greville, the lesson was clear. True progress is born not from perfection, but from the relentless pursuit of what is right. So it wasn't just a city that changed. It was a way of thinking, a way of seeing one another, not as strangers or adversaries, but as a community bound by a shared responsibility to ensure that justice was not just a promise, but a reality for all. A ripple beyond Greville. As Greville became a national example of reform and resilience, the story of Dana and Ethan Carter began to inspire other cities grappling with similar challenges. News outlets ran features on Greville's transformation, highlighting the policies that had reshaped the city and the people who had driven the change. One day, Dana received an unexpected invitation. A letter from a coalition of community leaders in Darrow City, a neighboring metropolis facing a troubling surge in tensions between law enforcement and its citizens. The letter was heartfelt and direct. "Mrs. Carter, your courage and advocacy have reached us here in Darrow City, where distrust between the police and our community has never been greater. We need guidance, a roadmap, and hope. Would you come and share your experience?" Dana stared at the letter for a long moment before showing it to Ethan. "Do you think this is something I can do?" she asked, her voice a mix of hesitation and determination. Ethan smiled gently. "Not only can you do it, but you're exactly the person they need. Your story proves that one voice can make a difference. Imagine what it could do for Darrow." A call for change in Darrow City. A month later, Dana arrived in Darrow City to speak at a town hall. The city, much larger and more fractured than Greville, buzzed with tension as her visit approached. Some residents were skeptical. What could a single person, even someone as influential as Dana Carter, achieve here? The auditorium was packed on the day of the event. The crowd was diverse. Local activists, concerned citizens, skeptical officers, and city officials all sat shoulder to shoulder. The room hummed with quiet anticipation as Dana took the stage, her calm presence commanding attention. She began by recounting her own story, the humiliation of being detained without cause, the anger that followed, and the decision to channel that anger into action. "What happened to me could have left me bitter and defeated," Dana said, her voice steady but charged with emotion. "But instead, it taught me something powerful. Change doesn't start with institutions. It starts with people, people willing to stand up, speak out, and work together." Her words resonated deeply. She didn't shy away from the complexities of reform or the challenges of bridging divides. Instead, she shared practical steps that Greville had taken, implementing oversight committees, fostering open dialogues, and creating mentorship programs that paired officers with community leaders. As she spoke, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. Faces softened, skepticism gave way to consideration, and murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience. At the end of her speech, Dana opened the floor for questions. A young man stood up, his voice trembling with emotion. How do we even begin to trust the police again when they've failed us so many times? He asked. Dana met his gaze with compassion. Trust isn't built overnight, she replied. It's built through actions, not promises. It starts with accountability, on both sides. And it grows when we see each other not as enemies, but as human beings with shared hopes and fears. Building a movement. Dana's visit to Darrow City sparked a wave of momentum. Inspired by her message, the city formed a grassroots coalition called Darrow United, dedicated to fostering dialogue and pushing for meaningful reform. Dana continued to support their efforts remotely, offering guidance and sharing lessons from Greville's journey. Ethan, too, played a role in expanding Greville's influence. At the request of Darrow City's mayor, he traveled to the city to meet with its police chief and senior officers. In candid, sometimes heated discussions, Ethan shared the hard truths about the resistance he faced in Greville and how he overcame it. You can't force trust, Ethan told the officers during one meeting, but you can earn it by being transparent, accountable, and willing to change. Darrow United began organizing events similar to those in Greville, town halls, community police workshops, and listening sessions. Slowly, the walls of mistrust began to crack. National attention. The ripple effects of Dana and Ethan's efforts soon attracted national attention. A prominent journalist featured their story in a televised special titled From Division to Unity: Lessons from Greville. The program highlighted their journey, showcasing the tangible impact of their work and the courageous voices of those they had inspired. The special resonated deeply with viewers, sparking a national conversation about justice, equity, and the role of community in driving change. Other cities began reaching out to Dana and Ethan, seeking advice and collaboration. It feels overwhelming sometimes, Dana admitted to Ethan one evening as they reviewed requests from cities across the country. How do we help everyone? Ethan took her hand. We helped them the way we helped Greville, one step at a time. Every conversation, every action, every small victory adds up. A monument to hope. Back in Greville, the city decided to honor the progress that had been made. A public art installation was commissioned for the square where Dana's ordeal had taken place. The piece, titled The Bridge, depicted two outstretched hands, one representing the community, the other law enforcement, meeting in the middle. The unveiling ceremony was a powerful moment. Dana and Ethan stood side by side, their hands clasped, as the mayor spoke about their contributions to the city. This monument is more than art, the mayor said. It's a reminder of what we've achieved together and a call to keep building the bridges that connect us. When it was Dana's turn to speak, she looked out at the crowd, her voice steady and strong. This isn't the end of the story, she said. It's just the beginning. Because justice and unity aren't destinations, they're journeys, and every step we take together brings us closer to the world we want to see. A lasting legacy. As Dana and Ethan walked home that evening, the city lights glowing warmly around them, they reflected on how far they had come. Greville was no longer just a small city with a hidden undercurrent of tension. It was now a symbol of what could be achieved when people refused to accept the status quo and chose instead to fight for what was right. Their story became a legacy, one that would inspire generations to come. For Dana and Ethan, the journey had been far from easy, but it had been worth every step. Together, they proved that even in the face of injustice, hope and determination could light the way forward. And that change, no matter how difficult, was always within reach. A national movement ignited. The story of Dana and Ethan Carter had grown far beyond Greville. Their unwavering commitment to justice, equity, and reform became a rallying cry for communities across the nation. What began as a personal fight for accountability in a small city had evolved into a national movement that inspired countless individuals to take a stand against systemic injustice. Dana's organization, Voices United, was no longer confined to Greville. Chapters sprang up in cities and towns across the country, each tailored to address the unique challenges of their communities. These chapters worked tirelessly to bridge divides, empower marginalized voices, and hold systems accountable. Ethan, still serving as Greville's police commissioner, became a sought-after speaker and consultant for law enforcement agencies. His approach, which emphasized integrity, transparency, and community engagement, was embraced by some departments and resisted by others. Ethan took every challenge in stride, knowing that lasting change required patience and persistence. Despite their growing influence, Donna and Ethan were mindful of staying grounded. They understood that the work wasn't about fame or accolades. It was about the people who had been silenced, overlooked, and mistreated for far too long. The Greville Summit, one of the most transformative moments in their journey, came with the first annual Greville Summit on Justice and Unity. The summit, held in a sprawling convention center, brought together activists, law enforcement officials, community leaders, and policymakers from across the country. It was a space for honest dialogue, shared learning, and collaborative problem-solving. The opening day of the summit was electrifying. Dana stood before a crowd of thousands, her voice steady but impassioned. "This summit isn't just about sharing ideas," she said. "It's about action. It's about taking what we learn here and applying it to our cities, our communities, and our lives. Change isn't something we wait for. It's something we create." The summit featured workshops on everything from restorative justice to the implementation of body cameras and the psychological toll of policing. Panel discussions included voices from all sides: officers who had embraced reform, victims of systemic discrimination, and experts who studied the intersection of justice and social equity. One particularly impactful session was titled "Healing Through Accountability." Dana shared the stage with Officer Rachel Kim, the Greville officer whose perspective had shifted after participating in the mentorship program. Rachel spoke candidly about her journey from skepticism to understanding. "I didn't think I had biases," Rachel admitted. "But the truth is, we all do. It wasn't until I started listening, really listening, to the community that I realized how much I didn't know. That was humbling, and it changed the way I approach my work." Dana added, "Accountability isn't about blame. It's about growth. When we hold ourselves and others accountable, we create the opportunity for healing and progress." The personal cost of leadership. As their influence grew, so did the pressures they faced. Dana and Ethan found themselves the targets of both praise and criticism, sometimes in equal measure. Social media, while a powerful tool for spreading their message, also became a platform for vitriol. Anonymous messages accused them of being radicals or sellouts, depending on the critic's perspective. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Dana sat in their living room, scrolling through her phone. The comments stung more than she cared to admit. "Why do we keep doing this?" she asked Ethan, her voice tinged with frustration. "Some days it feels like no matter what we do, it's never enough." Ethan sat beside her, taking her hand. "Because it matters," he said simply. "Because every person we reach, every barrier we break, makes a difference. And because the people who need change the most can't afford for us to stop." Dana nodded, drawing strength from his words. "You're right. It's just hard sometimes." "It is," Ethan agreed. "But nothing worth doing is ever easy." A tipping point. The movement reached a critical turning point when a major city, plagued by decades of mistrust and unrest, invited Dana and Ethan to lead a citywide reform initiative. The city had been rocked by protests after a high-profile incident of police misconduct, and tensions were at an all-time high. Dana and Ethan approached the challenge with their usual determination. But this time, they knew they had to dig deeper. The scale of the city's problems was daunting, and the divisions seemed insurmountable. They spent months meeting with community leaders, listening to residents, and working alongside local officials to craft a comprehensive plan for reform. The plan included a complete overhaul of the city's police training program, the creation of an independent oversight board, and the establishment of community safety hubs where residents could access resources and support. It was ambitious, and it faced fierce opposition from some quarters. But Dana and Ethan had learned that persistence was their greatest ally. They rallied supporters, addressed concerns, and adapted the plan as needed. Slowly but surely, they began to see progress. A new vision for justice. One of the most innovative aspects of their work in the city was the introduction of a program called the Justice Lab. The lab brought together law enforcement, community members, and researchers to experiment with new approaches to public safety. Ideas ranged from nonviolent crisis intervention teams to youth-led restorative justice programs. The program's success was groundbreaking. Incidents of excessive force decreased, trust in the police began to rise, and the city became a model for innovation in justice reform. Dana and Ethan's work in the city attracted national headlines. Their ability to balance empathy with accountability, vision with pragmatism, earned them respect even among their critics. They had proven that change wasn't just possible, it was achievable. A legacy of hope. Years later, as they reflected on their journey, Dana and Ethan were struck by how far they had come. Greville was thriving. Voices United had become a national force, and their work in cities across the country had sparked a movement that was changing lives. But for all their accomplishments, they remained humble. It was never just about us. Dana said during an interview, it was about the people who believed in a better future and were willing to fight for it. Ethan added, change starts with a single step, but it takes a community to keep moving forward. Their legacy was one of hope, courage, and the unwavering belief that justice was not just a lofty ideal but a tangible goal. They had shown the world that even in the face of adversity, unity and determination could light the way forward. And that together, we could build a future where dignity and equity were not just dreams but realities. The global stage. As the years passed, the work of Dana and Ethan Carter transcended borders, evolving from a national movement into a global call for justice and unity. Greville had become synonymous with progress and hope, and leaders from around the world sought the couple's insight on how to address systemic inequities in their own nations. The momentum reached a pivotal moment when Dana was invited to speak at the Global Equity and Justice Summit in Geneva, an annual gathering of world leaders, human rights advocates, and reformers. The summit aimed to confront some of the most entrenched social and institutional inequalities across the globe, and Dana's presence signified how far her story had traveled. A speech for the world. The auditorium in Geneva was a grand, opulent space with towering ceilings and ornate details that seemed a world away from the cobblestone streets of Greville. Yet, as Dana stepped onto the stage, she brought the humility and authenticity that had always defined her work. Thousands of attendees from dozens of countries sat in silent anticipation, their attention fixed on the woman who had turned personal pain into a catalyst for global change. Dana began her speech with a simple statement: injustice is not bound by geography. It thrives in the cracks of our systems, in the shadows of our assumptions, and in the silence of our inaction. But so too is justice unbound. It can grow anywhere, as long as we nurture it. She shared her journey, recounting how one humiliating moment had opened her eyes to a broader truth. What happened to me was not unique, she said. It was part of a pattern that too many of us know too well, but it taught me something powerful. Every action, no matter how small, can disrupt that pattern. Dana didn't shy away from the complexity of the issues. She spoke about the need for systemic reform, the importance of education, and the role of empathy in bridging divides. Her words were a challenge to the audience, to see justice not as an abstract ideal, but as a shared responsibility. Her closing words left the room in stunned silence before erupting into a standing ovation. True change begins when we stop waiting for someone else to fix what's broken and realize that we are the ones we've been waiting for. Expanding the mission. The impact of Dana's speech was immediate and far-reaching. Leaders from various countries approached her with requests for guidance and collaboration. She and Ethan soon found themselves at the helm of an international coalition called Global Voices United, an extension of the organization they had started in Greville. The coalition focused on adapting their approach to different cultural and systemic contexts, In some countries, the work involved training police forces to prioritize de-escalation and community engagement. In others, it meant empowering grassroots movements to demand accountability from corrupt governments. Donna and Ethan approached each challenge with humility, recognizing that the solutions had to come from within the communities themselves. A transformative project in Southbridge. One of their most ambitious international efforts took place in a city called Southbridge, known for its deep-seated divisions along ethnic and economic lines. Southbridge was a microcosm of global inequities, with sprawling slums overshadowed by glittering skyscrapers and a police force that was both feared and resented. Donna and Ethan spent months building relationships with local leaders and residents. They knew that trust was the foundation of any meaningful change, and trust couldn't be rushed. The turning point came when they launched the Community Justice Circles initiative. The program brought together diverse groups: youth activists, elders, law enforcement, and business leaders to discuss their grievances and hopes in a structured, respectful environment. The circles were guided by trained facilitators and focused on actionable solutions rather than blame. At first, the sessions were tense, with participants reluctant to share openly. But over time, the barriers began to crumble. One young activist, who had been arrested during a protest, found himself in conversation with the officer who had detained him. "I thought you saw me as a threat," the activist admitted during one session. The officer responded, "I didn't know your story. I just reacted. But sitting here, I realize how much I have to learn." Moments like these became the seeds of a broader transformation. The city began to implement policies inspired by the circles, including restorative justice programs, improved public services for underserved neighborhoods, and a citizen oversight board for the police. Personal sacrifices and triumphs. The scale of Donna and Ethan's work took a toll on their personal lives. The constant travel, the unrelenting demands, and the weight of responsibility were exhausting. Yet they leaned on each other for strength, their partnership growing even stronger as they navigated the challenges together. One night, during a rare moment of quiet in their Greville home, Ethan turned to Donna and said, "Do you ever miss the simplicity of how things used to be before all of this?" Donna smiled wistfully. "Sometimes, but then I think about what we've seen, what we've helped people achieve. And I wouldn't trade that for anything." Their bond, forged in the fires of adversity, became a cornerstone of their work. Together, they represented what was possible when love and purpose intertwined. A generation inspired. The global movement sparked by Donna and Ethan began to inspire a new generation of leaders. Young activists from all over the world cited their story as proof that change was possible. In schools, their names became synonymous with courage and integrity. Documentaries and books chronicled their journey, and their work was studied in universities as a model for ethical leadership. One particularly moving moment came when a young woman from Southbridge, who had participated in the justice circles, reached out to Donna. "Because of you, I believe I can make a difference," she wrote. "I'm studying law now, and one day, I hope to help people the way you helped us." Donna kept the letter in her office as a reminder of why they had started this journey. A legacy of hope and action. Years later, as Donna and Ethan entered their twilight years, they reflected on the extraordinary journey that had begun with a single moment of injustice. Greville had flourished, their work had touched millions, and the movement they started had taken on a life of its own. In their final public appearance together, they returned to the square in Greville where it all began. The crowd that gathered was immense, spilling into the surrounding streets. Donna, now older but no less vibrant, addressed the audience with her signature blend of humility and strength. "Our story was never just about us," she said. "It's about the power of community, the strength of resilience, and the belief that no matter how broken the system seems, it can be rebuilt, better, stronger, and fairer." Ethan added, "The fight for justice doesn't end with us. It's carried on by every person who believes that dignity and fairness are not just ideals but rights." As the crowd erupted into applause, Donna and Ethan stood hand in hand, knowing they had done their part to leave the world better than they had found it. Their legacy was one of hope, action, and an unshakable belief in the power of people to create change. And their story, far from ending, continued to inspire a world still yearning for justice, a world changed by courage. The legacy of Donna and Ethan Carter endured long after their final public appearance. Their names became synonymous with justice, accountability, and the unyielding power of human connection. Across the world, monuments and scholarships bore their names, not to glorify them, but to remind future generations of the lessons their lives exemplified. Reflecting on a journey. In their later years, Donna and Ethan lived quietly in Greville, the city that had been both the beginning and the heart of their journey. They often walked the same streets where their story had unfolded, now bustling with diversity and energy. Greville had transformed from a city of underlying tension into a model of inclusivity and cooperation. One evening, as the sun set over the cobblestone streets, Donna and Ethan sat on a bench in the city square. Nearby, children played, and families gathered, their laughter and chatter filling the air. "It feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it?" Ethan said, gazing at the monument erected in the square, a pair of outstretched hands, symbolizing unity. "It does," Donna replied, her voice soft but steady. "But some lessons don't fade, no matter how much time passes." Ethan nodded. "Like the lesson that change doesn't come from waiting for someone else to act. It comes from each of us stepping up, even when it's hard." "And that justice isn't about perfection," Donna added. "It's about progress. It's about striving to be better every day, no matter how far we've already come." A life well lived. Dana and Ethan's story became a beacon of hope for others. Not because they were extraordinary, but because they showed what ordinary people could achieve when guided by purpose and courage. Their journey was not without struggle. There were missteps, opposition, and moments of doubt. But through it all, they never lost sight of the values that anchored them. In their final years, they wrote a memoir together, Bridges We Built, detailing their journey and the lessons they hoped the world would carry forward. The book became a bestseller, translated into dozens of languages, and a staple in schools and universities. One passage from the book stood out as the essence of their message. "We are all capable of creating change, no matter how small or insignificant we may feel. Change begins in our homes, in our communities, in the quiet moments when we choose to act instead of turning away. It is not the responsibility of the powerful alone. It is the duty of us all. Justice, like a bridge, is built piece by piece by the hands of those willing to work together for a better world." The end of an era. When Donna passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 89, the world mourned the loss of a trailblazer. Ethan, her partner in every sense of the word, followed her just a year later. Their passing marked the end of an era, but their impact remained indelibly etched into the fabric of society. At their memorial service, held in Greville's city square, people from all walks of life gathered to honor their legacy. A young woman, inspired by Donna and Ethan's work, spoke on behalf of the next generation. "They showed us that no matter how overwhelming the challenge, change is always possible," she said. "They taught us that justice isn't about waiting, it's about doing. And it's our responsibility to carry that lesson forward. A world changed, a lesson learned." The story of Donna and Ethan Carter is one of resilience, courage, and the transformative power of standing up for what is right. Their journey reminds us that change begins with one person. Every movement starts with someone willing to say, "This isn't right, and I will do something about it." Unity is strength. Progress comes when people from all walks of life come together, setting aside differences to work toward a common goal. Justice is a journey. It's not about achieving perfection, but about continuous improvement, driven by accountability and compassion. As the world moves forward, the lessons of Donna and Ethan's lives remain a guiding light. They showed us that even in the face of adversity, the human spirit has the power to transform not just a community, but the world. And their story, though complete, continues to inspire those who dare to dream of a brighter, fairer future. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.